Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We'll get started in just a few moments, but in the meantime, please write in the chat box who you are and where you're joining us from. And please also make sure that you select your language. To select a language, click on the bottom where you see the globe icon, and it will take you to the English or French channel. You can then mute the original audio. And we've also shared a few poll questions that we encourage you to respond to while we wait for others to join. If you'd like to read these questions in French, the French translation has been added to the chat box. You'll also see both the poll questions in English and French on the slide. You'll notice that the answer choices in the poll itself are in both English and French. If you're just joining us, welcome. We'll get started in just a few moments, but in the meantime, please write in the chat box who you are and where you're joining us from. And please also make sure that you select your language. To select your language, click on the bottom where you see the globe icon, and it will take you to the English or French channel. You can then mute the original audio. We've also shared a few poll questions that we encourage you to respond to while we wait for others to join. And if you'd like to read these questions in French, the French translation of the poll questions has been added to the chat box. The questions are also on the slide in both English and French. And as you will note, the answer choices in the poll itself are in both English and French. I want to thank you again for joining today's session. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Brittany Getch. I'm a program officer on the Knowledge Success Project at Johns Hopkins Center for Communication Programs, and I will be your moderator today. Knowledge Success is excited to be partnering with EPI 2020 on this webinar series. This is our 9th session in the Connecting Conversations series. And if you missed the sessions in the first module or any previous sessions in this module, you can watch the webinar recordings and get up to speed. Those are posted on the FP 2020 YouTube site, and we're also publishing blog posts on the Knowledge Success site where you can find those links and read summaries from previous conversations. This webinar will last for approximately an hour, and we'll have an open Q&A discussion with our 3 speakers. This webinar is being simultaneously interpreted into French, as I mentioned, and it's being recorded in both English and French. The webinar recording will be available in the coming days. Participants are muted throughout the duration of the session, but if you have questions for our speakers, please type them in the chat box as you follow along. My Knowledge Success and FB 2020 colleagues will be moderating the chat box and will get to as many questions as time allows. Just a little bit about this Connecting Conversation series in case you're joining us for the first time. Connecting Conversations is a series of discussions on adolescent and youth reproductive health hosted by FP 2020 and Knowledge Success. Through the middle of next year, we'll be co-hosting these sessions every few weeks on a variety of topics. But this is not your traditional webinar series, and we're using a more conversational style, encouraging open dialogue, and allowing plenty of time for questions to guarantee you'll be coming back for more. This series has been divided into 5 modules, and our first one, which focused on a foundational understanding of adolescent development and health, started on July 15th and concluded on September 9th. Our second module is focusing on parents, preachers, partners, and phones, engaging critical influencers to improve young people's reproductive health. We are excited to wrap up this module with a conversation on digital approaches as critical influencers in young people's reproductive health, and learn more about unique digital strategies to engage young people. Digital approaches are becoming increasingly important in numerous health areas, and reproductive health, especially adolescent and youth reproductive health, is no exception. First, I'm pleased to introduce our speakers for today's session. Ayesha George is the Executive Coordinator at Hidden Pockets in India. As a trained counselor and a trained sexuality educator, Ayesha has been developing reproductive health programming, especially using innovative technology like audio podcasts, which are still new in Indian cities. She's been recognized for her contributions by Digital Empowerment Foundation's Social Media for Empowerment Award and Population First's Laudley Award. Dr. Leanne Gonzalez is a technical officer in the WHO Department of Sexual and Reproductive Health and Research, where she has worked since 2013. She is the WHO vocal person for sexual health and also coordinates research focused on improving youth access to reproductive health care outside of health facilities. She coordinated the development of WHO, UNFPA, UNICEF, and UNESCO's guidance on planning, developing, and implementing digital health interventions with and for young people, which launched in October 2020. She earned her MSPH from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health and her PhD from the University of Basel, Switzerland. Alu Azege is the country lead for Lovemata's Neja. She has 15 years of professional experience in broadcast journalism and media communications for change, including health media reportage with a particular focus on reproductive health. Her work aims toward a world where young people have safe and healthy relationships. As a digital media and development worker, she has learned the power of engagement and storytelling in a compelling way for social change. So welcome to all of our speakers. And before we get started with questions for our speakers, I'd like to start by displaying the answers to the poll questions. If we could bring those up, great. The first question, 2.2 billion or 2/3 of children and young people do not have internet access at home. This is true, and it looks like overwhelmingly the majority of you answered correctly for that question, so that's great. The second question, when young women find information about reproductive health online, they only use one digital platform, and this is false, and it looks like the majority of you overwhelmingly got this correct as well. Many young women use a variety of digital platforms to access information, including online searches and social media applications. And the third question, although many young women report finding information about reproductive health care through a digital platform, not many report taking action, such as making a reproductive health care appointment after finding information online. And this is also true, and it looks like the majority of you also got this correct. It is not a common step to take action after finding information online and speaks to the differences between increasing knowledge and then change in health behaviors. Great. So now I'd like to turn to a few questions for our speakers, and I have a two-part question to kick us off. So first, what digital strategies have you used to engage young people? And two, why do you think digital strategies or platforms are an especially unique approach for engaging adolescents and young people? So I'm not sure who would like to kick us off, but please jump in.
Should I start?
Absolutely.
Okay. Hi, greetings from Hidden Pockets Collective, India. And before I start, I just want to thank FP 2020 and Knowledge Success for inviting us to be a part of this beautiful panel. So the topic is very important, and I'm so excited to be there to speak for adolescents. And I have left that age and a bit far away from that, but I'm very excited to be a part of this discussion. So before I speak, I just want to give us a brief context about my country, India, the place I come from. So in India, right now, around 700 million people have access to internet. They are the active internet users. And by 2025, we'll have 900 million people who would be the internet users. And in India, 30% of the population actually consists of young people. I would say 15 to 24, the youth. That's the percentage, 30%. And a study done by Internet and Mobile Association of India has said that from the age of 10 in India, from the age of 10, the young person starts navigating something on the devices. Maybe the person uses the parents or somebody from the home, the elders, adult persons, mobile phone, and starts accessing that. So in India, like all these platforms, social media platforms or digital platforms have a age thing to log in. 13 is the age limit. But when it comes to sexual and reproductive health, in India we have a law called POCSO, which says that we cannot expose our young, not children, I wouldn't say children, our young people who are below 18 to any content which is related to sexual and reproductive health. So you cannot openly speak to them about safe sex, you cannot openly talk to them about contraceptives. So you have to be very careful. So when it comes to porn, if you are below 18, you're not supposed to watch porn. So this law, POCSO, tells you you have to be above 18 to access any information around sexual and reproductive health. But what happens is, we all know, because we all can access social media so easily, that we can make fake accounts. So most of the young people who are there have made, maybe they are 11 or 12, they have made fake accounts. So because that's the time when you're exploring stuff and you get your devices, your gadgets, and you explore it and figure out how to hack the system. I mean, it's very, you feel that enthusiasm to hack something and get into it. And it's always fun for young people to go against, something which the parents or the elders have told you, please don't do it. So it's just fun to do that. So we have a lot of fake accounts also floating around on, these platforms, young people who are not supposed to be there, but are there. So that's a very small kind of context I'm giving about my country. So because we know about this, that right now, like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, WhatsApp, there's so many things floating out there. And we know that most of the young population are somewhere sitting there waiting for, not exactly for information, but are grasping a lot of stuff from this digital platform. So it's very important for the organizations like me, like Hidden Pockets Collective, to be there with the young people so that we can provide them information. So what we did was, we used the help of audio podcast. So a year back or 2 years back, we created audio podcasts which can be put on internet, which can be downloaded, And also the same audio podcast had audio files. So we tried, because we knew that there are some people who can access internet and some people cannot access internet. So we have to think properly, how do we divide it? So we thought of having this audio files plus audio podcasts together so that we can provide information to young people around sexual and reproductive health. So these podcasts were called Pocket Shala. In India, in Hindi, Shala means like a school where you study. So that's why it's called Pocket, because it's so personal. You can keep it in your pocket and you can have that personal time and you can listen to it. And it's a form of it's a storytelling format of a school where two friends are talking something and talk about change in the body, relationship, menstrual, all those things which young people want to know about. So that is the thing we covered through our pocket, our podcast and audio files. So podcasts were kept in places which can travel on internet like SoundCloud. There's a library called open source library called archive.org. So they were pushed there, and we are also trying to engage with different platforms online. For example, in India, we have something called Ghana.com, Savan.com, because in general, Indians love music and we have Bollywood, Lollywood, so many words, movies. So people love to be there. So we are trying to engage with all these platforms that can they push this material on their platform so that when young people go to listen to music or extra information, they can get these information through that platform. So when it comes to audio files, the places where we cannot reach through internet, because right now we have a lot of spaces where internet is there but the quality is really bad and the speed is very sad. So there, if we have to reach, we have to make sure this audio file travels and goes to that rural area to the community leader who might not be very comfortable talking about all these topics, can use this audio file and have a conversation just around that community or the places that person goes. And it can be used through Bluetooth. I think the old thing called Bluetooth which we used to use. So it can be shared by Bluetooth. And also we tried having some relation with the community radio, because in India radio is a big thing. Now also we all love listening to radios, and many people actually listen to the news on radios. So if we can push these audio files in the radio so that it can reach that area, that specific community. So through our audio files and our podcast, we tried reaching these young people. And why it is very important, because right now there's no point sitting in a platform where nobody is there and we are just talking to ourselves. So if we have to be with the young people, adolescents, we have to be where they are. If they are in TikTok, we have to be in TikTok. I know it's very difficult. Like in India, it's banned now. In June, it got banned. So we had so many people on TikTok. So we had to create content so that suits SRHR and TikTok fun. So, and also Instagram, like influencers. I would say influencers are the new teachers. The young people, the adolescents believe what the influencers speak about. Let it be your lifestyle, let it be the makeup tutorial or anything. So we are trying to be that SRHR influencers who can give them accurate information, because we all know on internet the information is bombarded with a lot of things and we exactly don't know what is right, what is wrong, what makes sense. So yeah, we are trying to be the influencers who can, with other influencers who are already there, to help young people to get apt, and good information about sexual and reproductive health.
That's great. Thank you so much, Aisha, for kicking us off. Alu, I see you wanting to jump in, so go ahead.
Absolutely, and I identify very much with Aisha because for us in Nigeria, and it's pretty much like India, really. So we're not as many as Indians, but we are a large community. We have over 140 million young people, very vibrant, And so for our Love Matters platform here in Nigeria, we've been around for about 2 years, and we have a community of very active young people, over 1 million young people on Facebook particularly. So Facebook is still very active for us, and what we do there is make sure we have all forms of genres, from very short skits to little video dramas to audio drama. We put that on radio, just like Aisha has said, it happens in India, but also here. And so we also have the podcast, the SoundCloud cloud platform, where we use graphics to make it look very attractive for our young audience, in a way that we also choose the messaging that communicates with them. Again, radio has been very, very active for us. We connect our audience from the digital platform to the radios, and we do jingles, like sometimes 30-minute spots, maybe announcements, in very fun ways, or dramatized, talking about something like chlamydia, talking about diseases, talking about what to do during issues of GBV, gender-based violence, because again, during the COVID-19 period, there was a lot of that in Nigeria, and we found that many young people didn't know where to access the services, but being active on our platform, on the digital platform, they could connect from radio, and particularly WhatsApp. So you don't need so much data to be on WhatsApp, but so for the people who don't connect our radio programs through other social media platforms like Instagram, that requires heavy data to either watch videos or graphics, they come to WhatsApp, where light content is shared, and we're able to track that as well. So yeah, and that all of these are important, because again, internet isn't as stable, it isn't as affordable, isn't as accessible everywhere. In the course of the meeting here, I sort of went off. I have about 3 internet platforms that I can connect to here, so that I'm not cut off at any point. So that's what we go through. And of a truth, another thing we do to encourage people come on board, if you go to our platform now, is to get a lot of quizzes for them to participate in and games for them to participate in, so that they can win data, they can win call credits, and be able to get internet, because that, we find, is also a big thing for young people, particularly from this region. So yeah, that's what we've been doing, and that's how important we found that they've been. And we found a lot of feedback from people who have continued to give us feedback, because then we also partner with people who give SRHR services. We are not SRHR service providers, but we partner with such people, and we get feedback from them. When they went, they found people who they were able to speak with, as young people, as adolescents, as non-judgmental as possible, as inclusive as possible, and as confidential as possible. So for us, the digital platforms are bringing young people to service providers in a way that they get the kind of services they require, because without these platforms, there is a lot of judgment, there's non-inclusivity. Young adolescents go, and people are like, hey, you shouldn't be having sex, you shouldn't be talking sex right now, right? But so we encourage that, and we say, hey, as long as you are responsible, be armed enough with the information we're giving on our platforms, and make the right decisions for yourself. So yeah, that's how important these have been for us.
Great. Thank you so much, Alu. Leanne, anything to add?
No, I think Alu and Aisha really are just in their discussions and talking about what Hidden Pockets and Love Matters are doing. I mean, they are walking best practice, right? I think making sure that, the answer is not, what channel to use, it should be what channels, right? It should be, how are we reaching different demographics of young people? How are we taking into account that digital is not homogenous? And so having a Facebook page spitting out answers is not the answer, it's an answer. And then I really was heartened to hear about how, in both countries, we're still looking at radio, we're still looking at WhatsApp. It may not be the sexiest thing when we think about what the cool channels are and stuff, but it's still the channel that people are using. Radio is still it is universally accessible. And so I think that that's really the key takeaway. And I will say, coming from WHO's side, what we have been doing and the guidance that we've just put out in October was kind of doing a retrospective on the first generation of digital health interventions for young people, and pulling together some of the organizations in the space, the UN agencies in the space who have been implementing and learning, sometimes the hard way, over about 15 years what works and what doesn't work. And I think, what Aisha and Alu mentioned, their organizations are doing are just, again, like really capitalizing on that good practice. And I think particularly going to the places where young people already are, it seems so obvious when you say it, and yet I feel like you still have to say it because, as much as we would like, for example, you'd be shocked how many times someone goes in with a proposal to say, I'm going to create, the classic example right now is trying to reach this generation on Facebook in a lot of countries, right? It seems like a great idea. It's, Facebook Zero has made Facebook accessible around the world and in very low connectivity settings. And yet in many countries, Facebook is what old people use. And so if that's going to be the case, then, if you're really tied to that, it's not going to work super well. And so I think, again, this idea of multiple channels, taking into account that young people are not heterogeneous and how they're going online is not not homogenous. And so we need heterogeneous ways to connect with them. And then again, really making sure that, as Alu and Aisha mentioned, that you're able to adjust in real time, both your content and how you're reaching people based on feedback is just, critical to engaging with what we know about digital and young people in 2020.
Great, thank you so much. And something struck me, in what you all are talking about in terms of meeting people where they are, meeting young people where they are. So I wonder if you talk a little bit more about kind of how you're including youth in that development process. So how youth are involved in the design of those podcasts or those audio dramas, if you will.
Yeah, let me go first. Okay, so for us in Nigeria, our page is storytelling driven. On the average, we find that Nigerians have a lot of personal stories that can create the kind of content and the kind of intervention best practices you would like to curate for yourself, for your work, and for your interventions. So for us, we when we come up with a topic, for instance, gender-based violence, we find out who has an experience in gender-based violence, and people come and tell us their stories. So every story you find on our platform is a real life story. Some of them are re-dramatized. Some of them are told as they are, but some of them are replicated in graphic, terms. And what also helps drive content and traffic for that community is they are very excited that their story is being heard. Nobody is telling their stories in a different tone or language or color than they experience it. So we kicked off on that basis, and when people saw that their stories were put up for support, for counseling, for service provision, they went and brought in their friends. Hey, someone is listening to us now, because young people really want someone listening to them. They're tired of being, wagged at. They're tired of being told what to do. They just want you to hear their own experiences. They just want you to understand that they're human and they can make certain decisions for themselves if only they were armed right. If only they were given the leeway, if only they were given that benefit of doubt, if only they were given their human rights, basically. So for us, that's what happens. So our platforms are all driven by user generated. They are all user generated. So it's what our people go through that we put up. And when we find that a particular topic is becoming so rampant, let's say contraceptives, for instance, what we do is create content on contraceptives in a way that the messaging would appeal to them again. So we've used illustrations, we've used again drama, we've used graphics, we've used infographics in a way that would appeal to them. We've used Vox Pop, where people just come basically and tell you, hey, I think chlamydia is about what now? Okay, I'm using chlamydia a lot because that's the latest video we did yesterday. But let me say vasectomy. Okay, so we did a video on vasectomy, and no young Nigerian ever thinks they should do vasectomy. It's really interesting. But then again, we find that, there are people, one or two people here and there who have misunderstandings about them. And then we get experts or doctors to come talk to them in a way that they understand the little dangers in it. But above all, it's about arming yourself with the information that you need. And it's about creating the content that is conversant with their own experiences and present realities, basically.
Okay. So yeah, so when we were designing the audio podcast, so we thought of which language should we choose. Should we do it in English so that it would be like, because India has a lot of languages. So which language do we focus on, and should we keep it in English so that the whole country can listen to it? But then we thought maybe in English we have a lot of content, so we should focus on regional this area. So we were in Delhi, so we thought of doing in Hindi, and then south, that's North India, and then we thought of doing South India in Kannada. That's a different place altogether. So, and also when we were thinking about the topics, the team sat and we thought we should not be deciding on the topics. We should have the young people who would tell us which topics they want. I mean, there's no point me being 27 and deciding, okay, I have to talk about menstruation to the young people. If they don't want to hear or they want something more, I should know about it. So we had sessions with government school students, and also a community, a rack picker community, where we had few sessions where we sat together and we had sharing of stories, what happens in school. So we did not have bullying as a topic and sanitation as a topic, but the children, the young people, the adolescents told us, why don't you take this topic? This is so important because you talk about sanitation and my school doesn't have water. What am I supposed to do? And even the same thing happened in the rack picker community. The girl was like, you tell me to use water, I have to, literally go get water from the other house, and I get beatings from that for that. So could you please make something on sanitation and bullying also? So we all sat together, and with the students, I mean, I would say we were around 10 of us with the students, and they made us help. They helped us to choose the topics they literally want, and they have felt it, and we made a story on that. I mean, we created a storyboard on that. And also because we didn't want just to go there and get the story and come out, because they are very enthusiastic young people. They want to be part of this. So, and it is a podcast and it's fun to be in the production. We made sure that their voices are there in the podcast. They are the ones talking. So meanwhile, when they're reading the scripts, they're sitting with us, the session is going on, they're also, indirectly learning a lot of things we are talking. I mean, the boys who are talking when they're speaking about the script, indirectly they are also understanding when they're talking about menstruation, the myths related to menstruation. And suddenly they'll be like, oh, I didn't know this works like this. And they'll ask me, does it work like this? I mean, I thought it's impure blood, right? And I will be like, no, it's not impure blood. The script doesn't says it's impure. So then we'll have some kind of discussion. So we created the podcast or the script with the young people. We literally wanted them to be there.
Go ahead, Leanne.
Awesome, great. Yeah, no, I think and I don't think this is a digital specific issue. I think the idea of what meaningful engagement looks like transcends any sort of adolescent health. It's adolescent health. It doesn't matter how you're reaching young people. It's the whole concept of nothing about us without us, right? And I think that for digital in general, but also broadly with adolescent health, like previously, if young people were consulted, it would be like they'd be brought into a room, someone would ask them questions, and then they'd say, cool, thank you so much, see you later. And then, 6 months later, something would be dropped on them. And then we would all shake our heads and wonder why, young people weren't using it and why it wasn't cool. And I think what we're seeing, and I know what our guidance also calls for as well, is that, you've got planning, you've got designing, you've got implementing interventions, and there is important and meaningful roles for young people at every one of those stages. There's important roles at the planning stage where you're figuring out who's using what, and what kind of content is desirable and what isn't at the designing phase. I mean, I think a huge benefit of digital is that it is the great equalizer when it comes to meaningfully engaging young people as content developers, right? Because I took a look before this call and was just looking up the top TikTok profiles online, and globally, I think 6 out of the top 10 TikTok profiles are run by people under age 24. So we are in an environment where the people who are the best at certain types of digital influencers objectively are young people. And so I think in that, and in the fact that generating content and curating content on a lot of digital platforms is intuitive enough that young people are actually leading, and in about 2 minutes can probably make better content than any of us on this call could make in like a day working together. I think that that is something where, you know, we've lost the ability as a group to say, oh, I don't know about, you know, skill set and bringing people in. Like, young people can meaningfully be brought in the design phase. And then the same thing with implementation and rollout and monitoring things. I mean, the one thing, there are two things that I would point out when we think about youth engagement though, because what we don't want to do in general is realize, oh my gosh, we haven't been doing this well. We need to kind of do what Hidden Pockets is doing, what Love Matters is doing, and get right up into the communities. We can do that, but we need to keep in mind two things. One is that, you know, engagement of youth also means remuneration of youth where appropriate. Like, I think that if you're bringing on young people and you're engaging with them, I think we're past the point now that it's fair enough to do what a lot of us are still guilty of, which is, you know, handing someone a lunch voucher and saying, thanks so much for participating and doing my work for me. We need to be thinking about what remuneration looks like. And then the other one is safeguarding. And I think for people who are in the digital and adolescent health space, that's a word we're hearing a lot of. This idea of how do we make sure that we keep the adolescents' best interests at the center, that we are protecting them, that, you know, if they are being courageous enough or opening up to us to let us know about things that have happened that are traumatic, that we aren't just, you know, that we're able to kind of do our due diligence and look after them as minors, as people who might be in need of services, that we don't, again, just say as a community, just say like, okay, thank you so much for your input. Now we have to go. And these are challenges, and they're things that, you know, at this point, all we can do right now is have them in the back of our head and make sure that we're doing our due diligence as a community and engaging. But broadly, I would say, you know, this is a sort of thing where it's broadly good that we are seeing so much more engagement now. And I think it shows a lot of development, not just in digital, not just in adolescent, but also in this intersection.
Great, thank you, Leanne. Yeah, I think this has been really interesting hearing your thoughts on the incorporation of youth in all of these stages and how Love Matters and how Hidden Pockets is doing that in India, but then also thinking about how we're meaningfully including youth, you know, planning, designing, implementation at all stages, and what that looks like and the considerations we need to take. So we have a specific question from the chat here, and this participant mentions that Aisha and Leanne just talked about using TikTok and to share content addressed to youth. So if you could share a little bit more about using this experience, because TikTok is very popular among young people in this participant's country. So how did that look like in terms of your experiences?
So if I have to talk about TikTok, I mean, first of all, we have to be very careful what content we are sending out on TikTok. And on TikTok, we have a lot of formats. Like there are songs, there are dialogues, and different kind of dialogue. I mean, different languages. So for, like I said, in India, we have to see if, okay, I'm focusing on Hindi. Hindi is something which it's a language, national language. People are supposed to know it, but not everybody will know it. But it's popular. So we would see which movie dialogue associates a very good dialogue. We have to, you know, we cannot just put some random dialogue, because that dialogue will have some kind of meaning for everyone. So we have to be very careful what are we choosing, and then connecting the content with it. I mean, if we are talking about maybe consent, a very a topic called consent. So I have to make sure that I get a nice dialogue from a nice movie, maybe Hindi or Malayalam or Kannada. These are the languages of our country. So nice dialogue from this movie and I show it on TikTok so that it becomes a bit funny, because the thing is we are also trying to make sexual and reproductive health topic a bit lighter, because it's very tensed topic. It's already very tensed, and if we make it more tense, it will be like, oh my god, again we have to listen to this. So we're trying to make it a bit funny and try to involve a lot of movie dialogues and music so that it becomes lighter and becomes a bit funny topic too. Like if I'm talking about consent and I get a funny dialogue and a music and I mix it and try to give the message out there, how does it work? But I think we have used memes and it's working, where I'm not just telling few people, the mainstream people who are just watching TikTok or Instagram are slowly engaging, laughing, and somehow telling what do they feel about it. But it takes a lot of creative, that you have to be very careful which song are you taking, because some songs can be, in the song the guy is actually manipulating everything. So you don't know how people take the song or the dialogue, so you have to be very careful which dialogue, music, and content you're putting through.
I think just to maybe add to that, for me, TikTok's a great example of, if you want to get a young person meaningfully involved in a remunerated role, brilliant way to do that, because I think it's two things. One is I've been told that frankly, no one wants to see anyone over about the age of 29 or 30 on TikTok. It's considered weird. And so that has stopped me from having an active TikTok profile. But then also as Aisha kind of mentioned, there is a line between, and we could all probably identify it from when we were young people. There's a line between doing something that's culturally relevant and then trying too hard, right? And I think the further you are, again, Love Matters and Hidden Pockets have their fingers on the pulse of what is going on for the young people in their communities. But the further you are away from that, the more likely you're going to end up on the wrong side of that line. And so the other last thing I would mention is just that, again, for organizations that don't have as much of an on-the-ground presence, one thing to remember is that just because you say we need to be present on TikTok doesn't mean that you need to be present on TikTok as an organization. And something that's been really interesting to see is the organizations that are catching on to this and saying, okay, rather than us trying to start a large NGO TikTok channel, what can we do to facilitate the people who do have a footprint, like the young influencers who do have a footprint, who are semi-pros, or amateur, semi-pro, or even pro in terms of focusing, curating content, developing a brand, and who have built a following and have people who trust them. Back in February of this year, before we descended into the COVID joy that we're all in right now, the UNESCO and UNFPA hosted the Switched On Forum, which brought together a lot of different people working in youth and tech. And some of the most interesting participants were the influencers, the SRH influencers from around the world that they brought together. And you're hearing about the followers that they have, 50,000 young people following them in Cambodia. And, you're sitting here from an NGO perspective thinking, my gosh, I would dream of reaching that many young people regularly. Right. So if you are in a position where you are considering this, part of that landscape analysis that anyone should be doing would be figuring out who the influencers and the players are, and then deciding, do we really need to have something, or can we be the people providing validated, evidence-based content, dispelling myths? How can we facilitate the young people who already are in that space? And I think that is something that, if we can put aside our own hubris, I think would be really useful in a lot of settings.
Thank you both for those comments. I think that that's really interesting, especially with a platform like TikTok. My understanding, I'm also not cool because I'm too old for it, so I'm not on it, but my understanding is that it's a very short time period that you have to capture someone's attention. So it's, a matter of seconds in order to push out content. And so being very mindful of what that content is, what you're using, but then considering that you might not be the right person for that message, and that there might be, another youth organization or youth that are on the platform that could have more influence than you. So I think that those are really two really important considerations when you're thinking about TikTok. And Leanne, you mentioned kind of moving into this sort of pandemic life and this, kind of COVID-19 pandemic. And I think this also touches on a participant question as well. What are we learning about digital platforms and reaching young people during COVID-19? And what kind of opportunities are there to perhaps link digital media with self-care? For example, how to use condoms correctly as we're thinking about ways to connect young women and adolescent girls to services, to care, and to other aspects during this pandemic.
I will definitely be interested to hear whatever Alu and Aisha have to contribute, because I'm sure your organizations have seen massive changes and upticks in terms of what's being used. But I know at the global level, WHO has been monitoring the innovations that we've seen in delivering essential SRHR services for young people. And I think that those links will be shared following this. But I think what we're seeing globally is just an acceleration. So groups that were considering groups that had digital channels are relying on them a bit more heavily right now. I think where whether it's governments or implementing organizations, et cetera, where they see services getting cut off, sometimes it's been a great way to ensure service continuity. I think telemedicine suddenly has become a huge thing in many countries, where you want to make sure that maybe minimize the amount of time someone's spending in a health facility, but you still want to make sure they get good contraceptive counseling. What can we do? I think the CSE world, comprehensive sexuality education world, has also been an area where we've seen a lot of discussion and a lot of innovation. As young people are going online for school in many countries, or as they're missing big chunks of school, how do we make sure that, in addition to catching up on their maths and their science, that they're also catching up on the CSE curricula that they were supposed to get that year. And so the easiest thing, and again, I'm sure Hidden Pockets and Lovematas have probably been integral in this, in organizations like them, is making sure that we can continue to get information out. And that's where we've seen really big uptakes in digital, but then also you do see it in linking young people to services, making the ability to access services a bit more smooth, and maybe taking some of the counseling online or over the phone, just to make sure that someone can go straight and get the service that they need.
I agree absolutely. And for us, for Love Matters, and I'd mentioned this before, but I'll just like to say a bit that in the last few months, what we've done is go into partnerships with service providers in a way that where they have services to provide, but young people do not know about it, we have the young people and we can leverage on it and expose it for them. So we've gone into partnership with SFH and PSI. PSI has an arrangement where they are in conjunction with an online platform, a commercial online platform, where anybody who goes to buy contraceptives is given free delivery. So many young people didn't know about that. When we told them, they couldn't believe it. They said, oh my goodness, so I'm not going to pay if I order condoms. And they're very excited that the condoms are coming straight into their rooms, So we saw a spike in that. We saw that young people were happy that there was free delivery. We saw that young people realized that there were youth-friendly centers, that Mary Stopes International was giving out. They saw that they couldn't be judged even though they were too young, even though they were adolescents. And so for them, it was a thing of, okay, so COVID-19, there was a lockdown, we couldn't move, but we could still get some sort of, access to some toll-free line that we didn't know about, to some services provision that, we didn't know about. So for us, one of the greatest innovations for this period has been partnering with the entire chain of people in the SRHR world, where the counselors, the mental health of young people was also, given consideration. For some people, it was even legal. For others, it was just the services being provided. And for others, it was was just, just safety basically, but the entire chain was now in sync. So for us, the greatest innovation continuously will be to have a unison, to have a partnership where everyone comes on board and gives in the best they need to give so that the entire chain, so that young people are reached where they are with the right services they want. And I like that example given. Again, if you find us on Facebook, Love Matters Nigeria presently has a graphic that shows how to wear a condom. Now, another thing we did, and we thought this was also quite innovative, we found in our partnership, we got a doctor, a young female doctor, to teach them how really to wear condoms. Because again, from our polls, we found that there were lots of young adolescents who were asking. So the last time I used a condom, it either burst or it was too slippery. They either turned it the other way around. So content was created in that way. People came, an expert came and spoke live and demonstrated with a condom. You know how it's demonstrated sometimes. They found it very fascinating, but it was good. So yeah, that's one of the few ways we've been able to link the SRHR services, to personal care and how we can influence you personally, and affect your behavior going forward. Yeah.
Yeah. So in India, I would say like from March 24th, the schools are closed. I mean, till now it's not open. And before, parents used to tell us, please do not sit on your gadgets and devices. But now it's all, because everything is online. The classes, you have to attend all your classes. So all the parents are behind their children, giving them many gadgets like, please sit on this and get in your classes. And we don't know what happens after the parents leave, because everybody's busy doing their own household work. So in March, April, May, June, it was a very tough time, because in India there was a big confusion what is essential and what comes under essentials and what doesn't. So we saw that a lot of doctors had to go for COVID duties, and a lot of the gynecologists, a lot of people who were allotted for these adolescent clinics, or maybe gynecologists, were not available at all. So that was a very tough time, because at Hidden Pockets we have an email where people write to us, young people whom we connect to good gynecologists or service providers. But that time, even they were not very sure whether they can help or not, because it was such a confusing time. And like Liane told about telemedicine, then we had to think about, is telemedicine the answer? Because we can, then we can see a doctor, at least see a doctor and speak to the doctor and feel better. Because it was actually destroying the mental health of young people. Because I personally handled a case where this person went back. She was in college, but she went back home, and she thought she's pregnant, and she didn't get her period. So for 1 month, every day I had to speak to her, making sure that mentally she's fine and telling her that it's okay. Because that was a time where we couldn't go outside even to get a pregnancy test kit. So you have to sit and just think whether you are pregnant or not. And we have all these information on Google which tells, okay, use salt, use turmeric, and get to know whether you're pregnant or not, which doesn't work. And all these young people are using all the kitchen stuffs to understand whether they are pregnant or not. That was a very difficult time. And I would say in India, as I said, we have a law called POXO, so we can't openly talk to young people below 18. If a 16-year-old person comes to me, I can't openly talk to the person about contraceptive, about having safe sex. So it became more difficult to us, and it made us use our own innovation again. How do I reach out now? And it became very difficult to reach out, because all the young people are at home, and many of them went back to their villages. So not everybody stays in cities, because all of them pay rent, and that time, because you were not going to the office, there was no point staying in your rented house. So all of them started going back to their places, to their villages and the town. Now the question of how do we reach out if internet is not there? How do I reach out? But I would say, like, when I go back and I'm thinking about March, April, and May, it was a tough time for everyone. Let it be above 18 or below 18. We were all in the same line, where, because services were not there at all, because because our numbers were really high, and the doctors were very particular that right now we can't afford to look for your, if about your sexual and reproductive health. Already this topic is the last one to think about. And during COVID, it became not important topic at all. because everything became about COVID. If you have a cough, you have any pain, throat pain, you are important. Rest all can wait. So that was a very scary moment for the mental health, for everybody's mental health. It was a very tough time. But as I said, like we had to figure out influencers, get into social like Instagram stories, get the doctors there, speak to them. Can you come to the Instagram live stories, speak, and make sure that we have more viewers, and try to put all of them inside so that they get the information. So like I'm just thinking about the time. It was very tough. Yeah.
Thank you all for sharing your thoughts on kind of COVID-19 and the current sort of reality that we find ourselves in and how that might have affected digital health, and also, engaging with young people and reaching young people, and then sort of perhaps the opportunities that there are for accelerating digital health within this context. And I wanted to build on what Alu was just saying in terms of linking increasing knowledge to care. So what is critical to linking that increasing knowledge with reproductive health care?
I mean, I'm happy to start on this. I think it's keeping in mind what digital can do and what it can't do. I think it was Alu maybe in the beginning who had mentioned, you know, something, or earlier in this discussion, we talked about how, digital is one thing, but it's, I think back to some of the earliest excitement around digital for youth, thinking like, if we give someone an SMS telling them what a condom is, we're going to see adolescent pregnancy drop in this country. And it's like, well, no, that's not how this works. And I think this is where our excitement for the tech blinds us to what we know about adolescent health and the challenges around adolescent health, right? Whether it's on radio, whether it's on television, whether it's on Facebook, we know that there are many factors at play that are on this pathway, this theoretical pathway from knowledge change or even self-efficacy messaging, and someone actually stepping outside their house, finding a condom, obtaining the condom, deciding that they're going to advocate for condom use during sex, successfully advocating for condom use during sex, right? Like, and assuming that they know how to use all of that. There's so many different steps. And so I think what we can do to kind of think about the continuum of care is just be very mindful about what we're expecting from our digital health channels, and then making sure that, like, what Alu's been doing with Lovemata is that if that is what if we're trying to see that continuity of care, that we are linking with the correct partners to make sure that as we nudge an adolescent down our step, if Love Matters is saying, hey, here's awareness and here is knowledge on your right that you can access this, that if they choose to, for example, then they're linking, as they have done, with providers who can say, hey, I'm a friendly person in your neighborhood who knows about this and is willing to kind of provide you with the services that you need without judgment, right? And so I think it's where we see some of the coolest innovation in this space that will need to be evaluated, of course, but the idea of, digital, the tech progressing enough that we can not just deliver messages, but also provide linkages to vetted, youth-friendly, non-judgmental services should someone want to follow through. But I think even if we do get that, if we don't consider the enabling environment, if we don't consider that it is, social suicide for a young woman to be seen going to any provider and walking away with a condom, if we're not addressing that, or at least we're not being mindful of that, then we're going to shake our heads and wonder again and again why we're not seeing, the magical changes that we wanted to see.
Yeah, even I want to add, technology is one thing, and I think the other thing is infrastructure. If we keep telling that, these are the things, this is the information, you can go to the government hospital and adolescent friendly clinics are there, doctors would be there. And if the young people believe us and go and don't see any doctors there, and the clinic closed, it would be it would be disaster. Then at least, because young people lose interest and lose trust like this. If I tell a 17-year-old that you go to so and a place and the doctor will help you with contraceptive, and it's the person is not there, I'm going to lose all the trust I built. So I think infrastructure is also which has to come up with technology. With technology, we are providing a lot of information and building up those information and resources. But parallelly, I think the technology and the infrastructure has to work. I mean, the policy level, the infrastructure has to be great. And even when we talk about care, like we had a poll asking, do women use this information what you have given to her? I would say if a woman doesn't see her body as a priority, has never taken care of herself, or doesn't give importance to her uterus or her reproductive health, no matter what you tell her, she will never use it. So building up that that conversation around, it's your body, you have to take care, you can take care, it's okay to take care of your body. Give that support is very much needed for women, if I talk from Indian context too, because we don't have that context of taking care of us. So if I counsel a woman telling who's a girl who is 17-year-old, and I tell her about safe sex, contraceptive, you should take care of your body and menstrual hygiene. If there is no conversation around about this in her house, or no support in her house, whatever you tell her, she would be like, it doesn't go to her mind, because it's not the reality for her. For her, the reality is, I'll get married one day with a person and I have to take care of that person. That's all what reality is. So I think with technology, we have to build on the support, the other supports, and the infrastructure, which is very, very much important.
I agree with that. And our experience, again, back here in Nigeria is we've been able to, as a member of the Love Matters Global Network, cumulatively impact the people within our networks. And then, of course, as a global network, what we've done together is to learn the best practices, as a united brand and as a global pleasure positive movement, how people in Kenya or people in India are doing it. And because we share so much, just look at the similarities between Nigeria here in Africa and India, talking about infrastructure wise, we share most of those downsides, but there's a thin line and there's a familiar thread running through all of our experiences. So we leverage on ourselves to learn the best practices as they are done. So we don't reinvent the wheel. So we don't repeat wrong things that wouldn't work, basically. So I agree with you, Aisha. And infrastructure is very key. It's important. And your example of government, we've tried that, and the government the UN or WHO most times works with the government, and I'm sure, Leanne, you have better experience in that way, but I see here in Nigeria, it's not the best of experiences at all. So for us, we'd rather go with people who are tested and trusted, people whom we are sure that when we send our audience to, they would get the kind of non-judgmental support, the kind of all-inclusive, the kind of confidential service, and attention that they deserve and they desire. Yeah.
Great. Thank you all so much for commenting about that aspect. I think this has been a really great discussion, and I want to be cognizant of time. We're a little bit over right now. So I want to thank Alu, Aisha, Leanne for joining us today. Thank you all so much for joining us for this great discussion. And thank you all for your great questions that you sent via the chat. I think we've learned a lot, really great insights into digital platforms, digital approaches, engaging young people, and also, kind of the connections of digital and the expectations that we're expecting of digital approaches. I want to remind you all that we'll be posting and sending out a recording of today's webinar. We'll also be writing a blog post recap of today's webinar as well that will be posted. So we encourage you to check those out, further engage in the conversation, and we encourage you to follow FP 2020 and Knowledge Success at the handles and websites that you see here. And again, we'll be kicking off our third module of Connecting Conversations in the new year. So please stay tuned for an announcement and invitations for those sessions. And we wish everyone a safe and healthy holiday season. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you again to our great speakers. We really appreciated having you today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.